All right, we're live.
Yes.
We get it. Kind of on time, even a couple minutes late. It's fine.
Ish.
Ish. Yeah. So anyway, hi, hello, GitOpsians. Hi, Johnny.
Hi, how's it going?
It's good. Yeah. So much for our intentions to be back in January. Went to I went to Hawaii. Is what I did.
Nice. Like Oahu, or did you go island
Yeah.
hopping, or?
No,
Okay.
I just went to Oahu. I don't do island hopping because that involves boats usually, and I get horribly seasick. Would not have survived the Navy.
Okay, so funny diatribe real quick. I knew a guy named Chuck, also was in the Navy, also was like extremely seasick, and so we were on the USS Mitcher, and he would walk around with a plastic bag, and he would just be yakking all day and all night long. I felt
It's
terrible
real.
for the guy, but
It's real.
it's real. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Navy and I not that was not on. And when the Coast Guard called, I was like, look, guys,
Yeah.
no.
There's a serious situation here.
Yeah, no, it's not. No, boats and I are not friends.
Nice.
So I love boats. I love the theory of a boat. I love the look of a boat. I can't actually go on a boat.
Nice.
So there you have it.
Nice.
But yeah, so I just ended up taking some PTO, went on vacation, and that's why we are now starting off 2025 in February instead of January. So here we are.
Nice. Well, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know you had like a customer thing or something first week of January or whatever. So
Yeah.
it happens. You know, we're just here to be nerds anyway, so it's not like it's that serious if we have to miss a couple episodes. But we appreciate the viewers coming back and joining us in 2025. We're gonna focus this year mostly on just templating as a concept. We kind of ended on crossplane last year, and then after Johnny and I sat down and talked about it, we're like, let's take a step back, kind of like we did with CI/CD. Let's just talk about templating in kind of a general sense, like why we do it, what the advantages are, a little bit about like just some of the common templating technologies you're going to see. And then we can actually start picking out individual templating technologies and spend an episode on them and talk about business cases. Because honestly, guys, there's so many things that we could talk about on this stream. It's like boiling the ocean, and then the decision fatigue sits in, and no one's going to make these decisions for us. So this is what we decided to do.
Yeah.
But we still will, if there's any special requests on episodes or episode topics that people want, you write us in. We can still make time in our agenda for those. It's not like it's not that like rigid. We're not that strict. It's just nerds being nerds over here. We're just having a good time. So yeah, I think we just gotta, Johnny, we had a loose agenda that I can't remember.
Yeah. I think really just kind of we have a list of the things that I think the first like 4 or 5 templating technologies that we I guess could think of, and then I started kind of looking into a couple other ones, and then one of them, which I beyond just like reading the front page of it, I was like, oh man, this actually looks kind of cool. It's called Crow, Kubernetes Resource Orchestrator.
I have heard of it before, but I haven't played with it. Tell me more.
It sounds like it is very similar to Crossplane, and but it's like a combination of Helm, so you can package up things, and then it's also got the Crossplane type features where you can abstract API resources and kind of create custom APIs and stuff like that. So it sounds like it's a combination of like Crossplane and Helm together to do a bunch of different things. But like I said, beyond the front page, I'm not really sure what it does. I'd have to go back and actually look at it, but it looked very, very interesting to me.
Oh, cool. Okay, well, we'll add that to our list of episode topics as we go through.
Yeah.
But for today, right, we had JSONet, YQ, Helm, Customize, and Jinja 2, just as kind of like the overview of templating kind of things to discuss. Do you want to take it reverse order, Jinja 2 up to JSONet, or JSONet down to Jinja 2, or no order whatsoever? What do we do?
Yeah, there's really no order whatsoever. I mean, like I've got probably the most familiarity with Jinja and Helm, and then everything else is just kind of like I've known about it. I've just never really had to use it. So
yeah, it's interesting. So it's interesting, right? Because in the situation that I'm in, right, building Azure Red Hat OpenShift as part of the Arrow, we call it Arrow, Arrow. You'll hear it both ways. I say Arrow because I just like to pronounce it like a word, but people do what they do. So, but on that team, right, there's we see like what our customers are doing. Right, we've got the managed OpenShift black belts. They build out all this Terraform stuff to help the customers and all that enablement and so forth. But like actually building that platform where people put their IDPs, put their production apps, all this other stuff. We use such a small subset of the options. And so I more so see what people are doing with what we give them than actually get to use any of it myself, which I always think is really a little bit ironic. It's like, oh yeah, you should definitely use Terraform for that, or you should definitely use GitOps for that or whatever. But because we don't run on cluster, right? We don't use the same things. We do other stuff because of how. Anyway, it's very fun. I think it's a little bit like little ironic, little interesting. The patterns apply, right? Patterns apply, but the actual technologies that we use end up being fairly different. Although, except for we are probably going to introduce some use of Helm here and there. But that's just different.
Yeah, I think that's like the benefit of like my team specifically, where we do a lot of dog fooding. So we're like, hey, like we use Helm almost exclusively, but we also use Customize, and we'll use a combination of other, like whatever tool makes the most sense for the job. But yeah, it basically comes down to like, okay, one, is it something that we can support? We being Red Hat, can we support it? And then is it maintained if it's an upstream project or something like that? Like if it's got 2 commits in the last year, probably not something that we're going to want to commit a lot of effort to unless we want to take over. But yeah, it's been pretty awesome where like we're like, hey, this tech is really awesome. I think we should use it for this, and then as long as you can prove your point, like we'll implement it and we'll dog food it.
Yeah, I think that is really, well, we know I love the validated patterns team. If everybody knows that I would secretly jump ship for the validated patterns team.
Secretly, but I won't
secretly, not so secretly. Everybody knows I think it's super cool. Right, but anyway, so yeah, let's start with Jinja, right?
Okay.
Because Jinja, I think it's interesting because it started off being a thing that you use in Python, really. Like kind of a abbreviated, subject to some inaccuracies history lesson on it, right? Jinja 2 started off as a templating that was really just seen in Python. And it wasn't even part of the standard library in Python 2.7 when I started using it. That happened in Python 3. So that was like that's cool. It's like a language level templating. And I built websites, Python, Flask, Jinja 2, done, right? Super quick to throw up a website and have it do what the business needed it to do. And I did that for a couple small businesses a little more than 10 years ago. So that was, threw it up on Google App Engine, like that worked great, right? But that was like, that was just in line in your Python files. I mean, you could do some other stuff with it and go, but anyway. So now we see Jinja, right, in Ansible.
All over it, yeah.
All over it. And the same like decorator syntax, not identical, but really similar, is used in Helm.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go for it.
I was going to say that's one thing I think I was able to pick up Helm so quickly was because like just visually it looked so similar, and I was like, okay, I like conditional logic and stuff like that. It's a little bit different because it uses the Sprig library in Helm, but like being able to like create the templates and stuff like that using that, I'm already used to doing the double mustaches and like if for else, all that stuff. So I was like, okay, this is kind of nice. The learning curve was low. With Jinja, I picked up in Ansible. So when I first started at Red Hat, I immediately went to an Ansible class, and I was like, "Oh, this is crazy." So in the class, you're doing some templating and stuff like that of just creating like static files. But then when I learned about like, oh, you can actually do conditionals and if statements, and like you can really get complicated in these things. It was awesome.
Yeah, no, it is. So Yeah. So obviously, I think. Sorry, I got distracted by the question because it's like a complete. I didn't sleep well last night, and I'm on my second double shot of espresso, hoping to get some sort of computational power happening in the old noggin here, which is not really working. Honestly, I want to take a nap after this. But what was my efficiency? Yes, no, I love it in Ansible. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's a good fit there. We do have some Ansible playbooks on my team that we use to just do some basic tasks that just need to be really easily repeatable for anybody, as you know, as one does.
Yeah.
And so actually that's an interesting distinction between Ansible and Helm. Right, you can use Ansible to do a bunch of stuff for like production configuration and all the other things, the normal use cases, right?
Yeah.
And you can use Helm for all that and the normal use cases. What you don't really see with Helm that you do see with Ansible is, oh, I've just set up then this Ansible thing to just like take care of this repeatable dev task for me, or oh, I've just done these Ansible stuff so I can just kind of use this thing for some automated testing. You don't really get that in some of the other ones.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts about the Ansible stuff, and I keep doing that. And so we were talking before the show, just so you know, like it's not on purpose, like it just happened. So I'm not trying to be rude. But like one of the things I like about Ansible too is the lookups.
Yeah.
Right? And being able to use like, hey, let me just look up this environment variable, or let me look up a file or something like that. Where in Helm you have to have a cluster that exists. And when you try to use Helm with GitOps and you're trying to do lookups, it's basically it's the dumbest thing ever because it doesn't just work. All right, I'm sorry. I had to get that out for some reason. So
I feel you. Sometimes some things are so frustrating that honestly, I think I do the same thing. It frustrates me so much if it like kind of even close to comes up in conversation, I'll whine about it because it just irritates me. If I remember it exists, it irritates me. So I feel you there. That said, there are things that Helm does a little bit better. I can't think of them off the top of my head because I'm not smart today, but there are things, somebody knows them. Let's pause though. It's good for us to pause. And let's look at this question. Not that one. Our Hope 9 typed something in the chat and it landed just as I went to display the comments. My cursor stayed, but the comments moved up. Customize overlay is the way. You know what, Our Hope 9, I'm gonna make you come on the show and talk about it. It's your turn. You take the host seat. Anyway, so Linux admin 2 years, Linux application, 19 RHEL 8 machines. Look, friend, I work on OpenShift. I have never used basic RHEL. I'm not gonna lie. I don't. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't even use RHEL for my machine. This is Fedora. I'm so not helpful here. I wish I could provide some. Jonny, you got anything?
Yeah, I'll take a jump at this. I was trying to. This is me actively waiting. So I'm
so proud of you.
Yeah. So I think it really comes down to goals, right? If you want to be, if you want to have a certification to back up what you have learned at work, then I'd say the RHCSA is definitely the way to go, because that's going to be your system admin, entry level. It's beyond entry level, to be honest with you. Like it's more like your intermediate to almost advanced certification, and then that'll kind of set you up for RHCE, the Red Hat Certified Engineer. Cybersecurity, though, I think that really comes down to, that's a lot of process and implementation type things where sysadmin is part of that, but like the cybersecurity part is usually like applying patches, security POAMs, stuff like that, ATOs, approval of operator, all that stuff. CVEs, all that crazy crap. So I think if your goal is to continue on the system administrator path, or the IT related path, then yeah, probably do the RHCSA. If you want to do cybersecurity, I don't know if that would help you directly with that. It won't hurt, but it definitely won't. I don't think it's gonna like tee it up as much as you're probably hoping for.
Yeah, I would echo that. The other thing with cybersecurity is that's become a bit of a, I'm going to say it, it's going to be a spicy take. It's an overinflated term. It's a catch-all bucket that doesn't necessarily mean anything anymore.
Yeah.
Did you say I work in cybersecurity, and that probably, I think, for the lay person who would not understand your job if you explain it to them, like, that's fine because they're going to have a concept, but it's like, where, how, in what way, right? I think it's there's security, there's compliance. Those are not the same thing. There's like types, right? Like if you need a secure and compliant environment, is it HIPAA? Is it FedRAMP? Is it there's others? Do you have to SOX? That's the one I'm thinking of. Which NIST standards are important to you? I'm literally looking for my copy of my book because I wrote that chapter on cybersecurity, and I had like a list in there of compliance frameworks, but I don't have my own book handy, which tracks that I wouldn't have it handy. Yes, I looked behind the stuffy. I put books there sometimes.
I get
Judge me.
I won't. I get it. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it is overloaded. I think it's kind of like saying I work in IT at this point, right? Like there's just so much and so broad. The scope is so broad. It's are you doing monitoring? Are you doing red team, blue team type stuff, like what, or pen testing?
Pen testing, yeah. So I think if you want to do something in cybersecurity, being system administration, and there are cybersecurity aspects to it, right? You have to keep your systems up to date. You have to be aware of any vulnerabilities they're subjected to. You have to be you're in charge of the security posture of the systems you administer, but you're not necessarily in charge of the compliance or anything else. Wow, we're wholly like diverging from the topic of templating to
this is how it goes.
This is how it goes. You know what? This is fine though, because we're here to help our viewers, and so if we need to have a follow-up episode for the templating topics we don't get to, I'm okay with that. It makes my life easier. Anyway, so yeah, that's the point. Is when people tell me I'm interested in cybersecurity, my follow-up question is always, what in cybersecurity? What about it are you interested in? So if you want to do something in cybersecurity, I think that it would be a good idea to try and figure out if there's a specific area of interest. And then if there's a specific area of interest, then you might, there's a lot of free things like publications and so forth that you can go through to read. Take some time, read up a little bit more about it. And then there are certification programs. And I think with several years of experience plus some type of cybersecurity certification, you probably can do a transition into that as a career path. I think it's much harder if you don't have any experience at all, because like reliability engineering, I think cybersecurity, you need, typically there's an understanding of systems and how to kind of like pull them apart that is required to excel. And not that there are not companies that will hire somebody junior and completely train them and teach them everything from beginning to end. Like, I'm sure that exists. It's just, it's a little bit easier to get a foothold into things like this, where you need to be a little bit more of a generalist. Your scope of knowledge needs to be a lot more robust. For great example, like, so I'm a reliability engineer, right? My official job title is senior principal software engineer, but my actual like function is reliability engineering. And so I even though I'm a team lead, I still am on call sometimes. I carry the pager just like anybody else on my team. And so some of the things that we see happen, you have to do, networking. We'll have to do Kubernetes. We'll have to go into the actual Linux kernel situations. Like it hits sort of anything that you can imagine when you're looking at a system like, for example, OpenShift that I'm, carrying a pager for. plus our own like software infrastructure that we build and maintain in order to support the managed service that is Azure, Red Hat, OpenShift. Right. So there's a whole full stack. And I always tell you full stack is a trap. If you've never seen a stream of ours before, the concept of full stack engineer is a trap to get you to do too many jobs. But anyway, and I will die on that hill. I will say that spicy thing, even if it damages future career opportunities for me. Like that is a trap. But like JavaScript to Python to like Linux kernel to anything you can imagine has been the cause of a problem that I have seen in production. And so really, and sometimes even if it's a user error or a system error, we will treat it as if it's a security incident to make sure that we have collected all the critical pieces of data so that in the root cause analysis, we can identify where it will be better. So there's also that incident management process that's similar in reliability engineering to security engineering as well, and cybersecurity. So anyway, that is to say, if you're interested in cybersecurity, I recommend kind of identifying what that means to you, what your interest is in. It could be, computer networking and the security of that, and technologies like eBPF. It could be pen testing, right? It could be red teaming. It could be a lot of different things. Red teaming is super cool, by the way. So, to figure out what that means to you and then pursue that with kind of like some specificity. And then, but it's kind of like, you gotta, I agree with Jen. Like, I don't think the Red Hat certification that you mentioned is specifically going to be helpful. If cybersecurity is your end goal, but like, what's your timeline for that? Because you said you've got two years of experience. I mean, we're sitting here. I'm at 16 years. Johnny's at least 20.
Dang! Why'd you bring that up?
Why'd I bring that up? Because we're old. We were just having this conversation before we started the stream. We're old, Johnny. We got there. It happened. And so, right. So we're looking at this kind of, from our perspective of like, if I were going to make a change, what would I do today? But you are a little bit, sounds like earlier career, or at least earlier in this phase of your career, because you may have changed careers. I don't know. People do that all the time, sometimes several times in their lives. I was reading something about that. I think it's interesting. I love that for people, actually. And so you may have a longer timeline where you could say, well, I want to do this thing right now, but in 6 years, ultimately, I want to be dealing with cybersecurity. And maybe like cybersecurity and quantum computing, which is a completely emerging space, would be an interesting thing for you to kind of start picking up and kind of ultimately move to. I don't know. Have a great time figuring it out, though, because it's a great opportunity to just explore so many things.
Can I add something really quick? Like, I think, and let me know if you agree or not, but like, I think when you find a lot of successful people in IT billets or even cybersecurity billets, right, it's not necessarily that they're an expert in a very specific thing, right? Like, it's not like, okay, Johnny's a Linux expert, he's the Linux dude, and that's why he's awesome. But I think it's when you have people that can see the big picture, right? So you brought it up, and like, it's actually what made me think of this, when somebody that can look at like a problem like, okay, is this a virtualization thing? Is this an operating system thing? Is this a networking thing? And being able to tie those, being able to look at a problem, work your way backwards towards the problem or even away from it, and isolate, like, okay, hey, here's where troubleshooting has led me. Here's where I'm at. Here's why I got to this decision. Because you can actually see, like, okay, hey, look, if I can't resolve this, is it my network config on my machine? Is it the network in general? Is it the DNS server that's down? Like, where in the path is the problem? And I think when you can actually get to the point where you can see a problem like that and you can see it in steps versus just seeing it as a problem, right? That's where I think a lot of people are successful. People in cybersecurity, when they can talk tech, when I can come to you and say, hey, here's why we can't make this change, or here's why we can't implement that patch, you say, no, you have to have it because it's critical, isn't the right answer sometimes. Sometimes it's like, okay, hey, that's fair. Let's do a POEM, like a plan of action to milestones. How are we going to mitigate this? Or how are we going to accept the risk for this, right? Because you need to bubble that up to your leadership when I come back to you and I say, hey, we can't do this because it's going to break this, and here's how. just having an understanding of like, okay, he's saying if we do this, it's going to break the file system. If we do that, then they're going to have to reload, blah, blah, blah. So that way you can have the conversation at both sides, right? A technical conversation and then a general conversation when you're talking to leadership. So I think that's really where people that are successful, that's where I think that's why they're successful, because they can kind of see the whole thing and they're able to break it down and because they understand it, right?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I can like security is an example of this. When Log4j happened, that was a very like interesting thing to be on the ground floor of, because that was a day zero vulnerability, right? And watching our security experts, like what they did, how they took action, what processes we already had in place that we hadn't probably really thought too hard about because we've been doing them for so long, but suddenly those helped us to immediately know where we were and we're not vulnerable. And even like within those vulnerabilities, like what the real like surface area for risk was. That was really cool. And I think Vincent is our senior VP of cybersecurity at Red Hat.
Yeah, I think so.
Vincent, he posts a lot of interesting articles on LinkedIn, is my point. So if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, maybe do, because he does post some really interesting stuff. So I think he, I got an opportunity to like very briefly chat with him during that. Really, really like very cool, smart person.
Yeah.
Whole team that I've ever worked with in our cybersecurity people are just phenomenal. Like plus to those folks. And then look, I would say, I think some of our folks even have posted blogs. Read through that stuff. All very cool. I do want to move on because we had a second question about these exams. And feel free to ask follow-up questions or anything. Like, we're here to help. And our Hope 9 is here to help too. One of our like favorite viewers ever. We really love you, our Hope 9.
We do.
So how to self-study. I don't know if they do discounted exams. I have literally no idea about any of this. I just work here. I'm just an engineer. But how to self-study is, I've never taken these exams, so I don't know how to study for these exams. I'll let Jonny chime in a second. But I am a self-taught engineer. So yeah, developers.redhat.com is a great starting point.
Yep.
I am a self-taught engineer, so I can tell you the things that I have done that have been useful to me for learning. And this is going to sound like very, like, I don't know how it's going to sound actually. So something that I do when I need to gain a new mastery is I basically start building myself an encyclopedia, like a physical book. This is not it, but like a notebook like this. And I actually have a shelf of them over here. And these are things where the reference material may be very easily found online. This is stuff that I may have read in a physical book that I have on my desk. It doesn't really matter. I kind of go back to my high school days and I sit down and I take notes on the things that I found key, terms that I think I need to remember. I'll sit out and write the definitions of them. I don't go completely crazy and alphabetize it or anything like that. But I really go back to very analog things. So I do whatever my reading is, whatever the labs are, whatever the hands-on things are. And then my follow-up action is I write down some of the key elements for myself. And then because of how my memory works, there's a period of time for which I never need to reference that. But then I may be a couple years down the road and be like, oh, wait, what was that one Python library? And I could Google it, but I can also physically grab my thing that I wrote, find that in there. And that also kind of helps me fully context shift back into like the frame of mind that I was in when I was learning and trying to master that skill. So it also helps with the actual context shift. And I think this is similar to there's an effect that's like very real. It's called the doorway effect, which is like why you can walk into a room and forget why you were there because your brain transitions when you physically cross a threshold. Maybe it's called the threshold effect, something like that. I don't remember. I'm not a neuroscientist or a psychologist or whoever it is that comes up with these things, but it's a real thing. And it's part of the reason why these things happen to you, like why you can walk into a room and forget why you were there, is that your brain actually does an actual transition when you pass through that threshold. So I have found that for me, at least, that is really a similar thing, that if I kind of physically do something to anchor myself back to where I was mentally at the time I was learning a skill, I'm more apt to be able to transition into having that fresher again.
Yeah.
And yes,
Yeah.
which might work. It just doesn't, for me, I don't find it as effective as grabbing the thing.
Yeah, the way I learn, it's actually I didn't realize this. Is a good friend of mine, Bobby Acha, when I was explaining it to him, he was like, "Yeah, it's called something like the professor effect or the teacher's effect or something like that. I can't remember." But basically, like when I'm learning something, when I feel like I've understood a topic, I'll start whiteboarding it, and then I literally explain it out loud what I'm doing, and then what that does is that helps me like verbalize but then visualize what I'm talking about, right? So like as I'm writing it down, I'm like, okay, hey, look, I set up this server, I'm gonna open up these ports, I've got to have this firewall thing open, or I've got to do this connection, and then I'm gonna go over here, and here's why. And what that does is it helps me kind of like ingrain the why behind the effort. And when I can explain to myself why I'm doing something, I tend to like just accept it faster, and then it burns in faster. I can't write anymore. Like I've been typing for so long now that like if I try and write, like I start like nitpicking my handwriting, and so then it becomes a psychological effect of like, okay, who cares that it looks like crap?
Did you used to have nice handwriting?
Yes.
Oh, I've never had nice handwriting, so that doesn't happen to me.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I used to. My mom, when I was a kid, that was her thing. Like, make sure everybody can read what you're writing. So like now, it looks just like it looks like I'm a doctor, but I got
Yeah.
hit, and so like I'm a doctor writing backwards. It looks awful.
Yeah. Well,
But
and
yeah,
so for me, I'm left-handed, except for when I was a child in school, they made me write with my right hand because they didn't
like
they don't like the smear.
Yeah.
Right? Because what happens if when you're learning how to write, at least in the United States, I can't speak about anywhere else. When you're learning how to write, they give you these big line sheets of paper that are like, I don't know why that paper is the way it is. It's not good paper, but anyway, it's cheap, I guess.
Yeah.
And these pencils that have like, they were bigger pencils than like your standard like number 2 pencil, right? They were bigger so that your little hands could do better. So then what's happening though is your corner of your hand, side of your hand here, when you're left-handed and you're writing left to right, it just smears that pencil right along. You get this nice like oil slick on your hand as well. So there, and I was always borderline ambidextrous. So when my hand would get tired, because when you're first learning to write, remember your hands get tired.
Oh, yeah.
I would switch to my right hand and keep going. So because I already did that, they made me be right-handed.
So when you write today,
on them, my handwriting got even less readable when they made me right-handed.
That's awesome.
It got worse.
They
should have just lived with the smear. Or taught me to do this, which is probably terrible for you, actually. But like, this is how a lot of people who are left-handed write.
Yeah, that's what my mother-in-law. She writes like that with her kind of a wrist cocked.
Yeah, so that you don't get that.
Yep. So before we move on, I just want to I'm going to share my screen really quick because I want to show. I'm sorry if I butcher your name, Swapnil. But if you go to redhat.com and then you do /certification/ArchCSA, whenever I study for an exam, specifically a Red Hat exam, but really anything that's got exam objectives, then I will come to this page and I'll look at the exam, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Here's the ArchCSA, and here are the objectives, and it tells you everything that's going to be on the test. Right. So, hey, you need to be able to conditionally execute code. My dog is barking at something outside and it's driving me crazy. Using loops, process some scripts and stuff like that. Like, these are all the things that you can be tested on. And so, like, when I'm going through, especially a Red Hat exam, I look at these and I say, okay, cool. Can I do all of these? Like, when I see diagnose and correct file permission problems, I immediately start thinking of like what that means, right? Okay, I need to be able to chmod something, probably a sticky bit, probably some type of like ACL or something like that, or some kind of like extended attribute, whatever it is. And as long as I can like talk myself through those different things on like what those are, because a lot of times, to your point, Hilary, about like, hey, if I can go back to the notebook and find it, I can get back to that frame of mind. For me, it's like if I know that I can go look it up and what to look up, and I know kind of like where to target my search, then that's where I do really well on these things. And so every Red Hat exam has a set of objectives associated with it that you can go online and look at, and then that's where you really understand like, hey, this is what I'm going to be tested on. And when you can talk to these things internally and say, I know every one of these, or at least a majority, then you're going to do extremely well on the test.
Yeah. And I will say the other thing for me, and your mileage may vary, like some people are able to read through things and immediately understand and grasp it. I was always really kind of funny in school because I would do okay in math. I would get B's in math. And like I have dyslexia, so a lot of times like the reason I didn't get an A was because I literally transposed numbers, and that happens to me. Yeah, man and dash care are great. Or dash help on like any CLI is amazing. But anyway, but I would consistently score better in science than math. And it would be the same math, right? It's the same math, but one is the theory and the other was the practical application of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I always have done so much better learning something by solving a problem versus learning something from like the docs or the textbook. So I think you need to, if you're going to self-study, it's important to know how you learn.
Yeah.
Like, no, if you don't know that, try to figure it out. Talk through things that have been successful with you in the past with a friend or a family member, somebody who can kind of help you identify what has helped, like, you know, what might or might not work for you. I honestly find that if I'm struggling to learn something, talking through with my best friend or my husband, people who know me really well, sometimes that'll help me identify why I'm not getting the skill mastery that I was expecting or that I was looking for, or like where the mental block is for me. So I don't really learn so well from videos. They don't help me. But I have found if I listen to a video 3 times, then the information will stick in my head better, which is a really exhausting amount of time to listen to a video, but that's what it is. I know that about myself. I know that I can do that. And so that means that if I'm doing something like washing dishes, folding laundry, taking a walk with my dog, you know, anything that doesn't require me to really like engage mentally with what I'm doing, I can put on a video or an audio thing, and maybe it's the third or second time I'm listening to it, but it'll start to like,
Yeah, I like oh man, you just said something and damn it, I forgot. Yeah, anyways, you get blocks, right? Like you get to a point. Oh, that's what I was gonna say. I'm a builder. I'm a Lego guy, right?
Yeah.
I learn by doing things, and like, I mean, I can learn by listening and I can learn by watching and stuff like that, but I learn faster, and I think it sticks more when I'm actually just doing it.
Mm-hmm.
And something else that you said that I think really helps me is like, if I can apply it, if I have like a practical, if I'm just doing something because you're telling me to do it, like I'm like, I don't really care about this. Yeah, I'm never going to use this. And so like, to me, if there's no value in it, like I mentally cannot put any value on it. Like you want me to know it, but I can't because I just don't give a crap about it. Like you're not telling me why I need to care. But if I can apply it to something, like when I was first learning IT, I was like, okay, well, how do they do like Windows DNS, and how does this enterprise run, and how can I do the same thing on Linux? And so then I would start like, oh, let me go learn how to set up email. Let me go learn how to set up DNS and DHCP and all that stuff in Linux. And that's literally how I taught myself. Like I would sit there and, how do I do this? Oh, they're doing that. What's the equivalent of that in Linux? Let me go do this.
Yeah, so I started my career in quality engineering, right? And so test automation was really emerging at the time, and there were some tools that existed, but they were very expensive because they were closed source. And Selenium had just started coming out, and not really. I don't want to say it just started coming out because it had been around a minute, but it was starting to really hit that mainstream. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. It was starting to mainstream. The problem was it was really, they had the Python SDKs, but the people who were using it were all doing it in Java. And I did not want to learn Java.
Mm-hmm.
I still have not learned Java. I will not learn Java. So what I did was I knew a little bit of Python and a little bit of PHP at this point. I went and I looked at Stack Overflow and at how people were solving the same problems. The documentation was pretty good. I did a lot with just the documentation. But I went and learned how people were solving some of the problems that I was encountering, and I found the Java solutions. I didn't filter on language. So I found the Java solutions, and then I just went and rewrote those in Python, which was a lot easier than you would think. And it worked.
That's pretty clever. Yeah, that's clever.
Yeah, it worked. Right? So sometimes when you don't know how to do a thing, kind of like what you're saying, like, well, how does Windows do this? Okay, now I'm going to go re-implement this, but in Linux. That's valid. Okay? Mm-hmm. That is a valid way of learning something, is to see what the pattern is, because some of the patterns are language agnostic. The patterns are mostly platform agnostic, right? The patterns are what matter. That's why there's this design patterns book that like every software engineer reads, right? Because the patterns can be completely just reused. Yeah. Which actually brings us back to our home idea topic of templating. Yay, we came full circle.
I do want to make one last thing before we completely jump off. If you don't already have a developer account on redhat.com, developers.redhat.com, go out and get a developer account on developers.redhat.com. The reason why is if you're learning RHEL, you get 16 nodes of RHEL. If you're learning OpenShift, you get 16 nodes of OpenShift, and you get that for free. And so with that RHEL subscription, it gives you like you have an employee subscription, like you have a sub to Red Hat software, and you get all those nodes for free. So you can spin up virtual machines, you can spin up OpenShift clusters, whatever you're trying to learn. Those tools are there for you, and they're there for you for free. So there's the only cost is your effort. So I just wanted to say that before we moved on, because I feel like there's not enough people that know about developers at redhat.com, and like they really should be using it.
Hang on. Sorry, guys, you're going to hear my loud keyboard. I want to respond to rhope9, because the answer to that is yes and also no, but I also know how we can help you get what you need. So just email me. And if you don't have my email, I have yours, 90% sure. Because Johnny
and if you don't, I definitely have it.
Well, because you forwarded me the email from him with the swords.
Yep.
I got that email, by the way. I just didn't do anything with it. Anyway, right. So where were we on that? Right. I wanted to actually augment that. We're never getting back to templating. That's just going to be what we talked about in 2 weeks. That's fine. I'm okay with this.
That's fine. Yeah.
I'm happy that we can help the viewers today. That's why we're here. I did not know OpenShift before I started interviewing with Red Hat. I still got hired as a principal SRE to work on OpenShift products. So how did I do that? I used the developer tools that Red Hat makes available and learned about OpenShift through what was there. And that worked. That taught me what I needed to know to be able to not just do well in the interviews, but also come in and do the job. So I honestly, and our developer stuff, we're actually going to there's a conference Red Hat's going to be at in Santa Clara, California next week, which I usually go to this, but they changed the cities, and now I don't know if I'm going to drive an hour to get there, because it's a really long drive. I don't like driving. I live in the Bay Area. I just don't like to drive anymore. I'm from LA. You would think I would be like, oh, wow, driving's no big deal, because I used to do it all the time, but I actually really just can't anymore.
Yeah, traffic sucks. It's the worst.
Sucks. Yeah. And I'm not a patient person. But anyhow, we have put so much work into our developer hub, and we have an entire team of people that continues to put a ton of work into our developer hub, so that it can be a useful tool for people to learn things for free that benefit them. And the amount of things that you get, all of the Red Hat O'Reilly books, I think, are available as a ebook download for free there. If not all, a vast majority. Some of the Manning ones as well, I believe. so many of our books are available for free there. Hands-on demo.
Yep, that's exactly where I was about to go. Yep,
like
exactly.
Demo environments that you can just like play with and work with. I think you get them for like 30 days or whatever.
Yep, little sandboxes, all
Little
kinds of stuff.
sandboxes.
Yep.
I mean, the sandboxes, they run on the real on the real systems. Like there's nothing different about them from anything else. Those are what you would find any like IRL, right? This is in a non-sandbox environment, it would be the same. So the yeah, that is a really, really, really valuable tool that Red Hat puts an incredible team behind. That is just making cool stuff and making it available for people to learn for free. So definitely 110% go check that out. I have an account there and I'm a Red Hat employee because they don't do anything different for us.
Right.
It's the same.
Yeah. If you look at anything that I've done, all my stuff is used in my developer account, because one thing I learned early on in consulting was everybody thinks that, oh, you're Red Hat, so you've got this super duper account that gives you access to all this stuff. And so I was like, all right, well, let's just level set then. I'll go and use my developer account, which means I'm just I'm an unpaying person at this point, right? I have my free account, and that's what I use for everything, for all my demos and all that.
Mm-hmm.
So that I can prove that, hey, look, this is my regular account. It's not my Red Hat account. I have no extended extra goodies or whatever. This is just all the software that's available to me, and here's what we can do with this. And so it makes that conversation a little bit easier, especially for customers, because now they know, like, okay, it's not just the Red Hat guy that's able to get this working. It's actually possible now, right?
Yeah. So, and yeah, there is a paywall for some additional stuff. I've literally never needed any of the stuff behind a paywall. So I'm sure it's valuable, though. I'm sure there's a reason it's there. Somebody needs it. It just hasn't been me.
Yeah. All the KB stuff is back there. So
yeah.
It's good.
But yeah, so that is to say, good luck to both of you who wrote in about interest in exams and everything. I wish you all the best on those endeavors. Or if you decide not to take the exams and do something else, I still hope you find any of the things we just shared with you useful.
Yeah.
We have 9 minutes left. What do we want to do?
I still got stuff to go on. I mean, the one thing I've got more to say. This is a good topic. I like this topic a lot because, like I think for me, when I was coming up, I didn't have anybody that I could really lean on and ask these questions to. You know what I mean? And so, like, it's something that, like, personally, I take a lot of pride in when people do ask. It's like, and I do. I think that's why I probably just keep rambling on about it, because it's exciting to me. Like, I love taking the exams. I was an RHCA level 5 or whatever, because I'm a glutton for punishment and did all these other crazy exams. But what you were saying about, like, the developer stuff, like, indirectly, that's why we're here, right? We're part of the office hours and stuff like that. And so we may not be part of the developer website, but we're, like, our availability to sit here and answer these questions and do these live streams, it's to help support that cause, right? In the end, we want our customers, our viewers, our community really to be better. And I just think it's awesome. So,
and I think, we bring topics to these shows because we're trying to add value to doing nothing by, like, just saying, you know what, if we just said, hey, we're doing an Ask Me, we've done a couple Ask Me, and those were very, very active episodes, so maybe we're overdue for one, right? But we can't do that every week because it would get nothing.
Boring.
Eventually bring nothing. If you're a longtime viewer, if you're a new viewer, I want to encourage you to just ask your questions. And sometimes we might tell you, hey, we'll have to answer that offline, email us. Because sometimes we have an external guest who's not a Red Hatter, who's, like, dedicated time out of their day job to come and do the presentations. So, on those days, we're definitely a little bit more structured. But today, you know what? We're just going to go talk about templating in 2 weeks, and I'm okay with that. Or we'll talk about something else in 2 weeks because somebody else will need something. I'm okay with that. Like, this is not serious. This is
we'll forget.
Or we'll forget. That happens too. That goes back to the being old thing that I mentioned. Mm-hmm. So anyhow, but yeah, so, like, let's just keep on this for a little bit more. And yes, I'm glad that the partner access is so good for you, or Hope 9. That makes me happy.
Me too.
the stuff in the developer portal is really useful, and there's so much there that, going back to what I said, like when you say you're interested in a topic, try don't boil the ocean, try and narrow that down what your interest is. That is a great way to do that, is to leverage the resources in there to kind of help figure it out, because we've got like all kinds of stuff in there. Like, I'm actually just going to bring it. I don't even remember everything that's in there. I know we've got Kubernetes related content in there. We've got Podman content in there. I think there's JBoss, Java.
There is middleware. Yep.
Middleware, all that is in there. I don't know anything about Quarkus, except apparently it's nicer. I can't. I remember when I said I'm never going to learn Java. I'm never going to learn Java.
Yeah, I'm sticking to it. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you on that boat. Or car, rather.
Yeah, we're in a car. We're not in boats. Can't do. Can't do the boat. So anyway, yeah. So that's a great way to kind of help identify, right? Is just kind of look around what's in there. Another thing I did have when I was coming up is a Linux user group. That's actually how I got my entire career started. Was somebody who worked with my now husband was like, oh, you guys should come to my Linux user group on Saturdays. It's like the last Saturday a month or whatever it was, right? That Linux user group still exists, by the way. If you're in the Los Angeles area, San Fernando Valley Linux user group still runs. Brian Ragazzi is his name. He founded it. Longtime friend and mentor of mine. He taught me so much. That group taught me so much. I learned like all of my foundational skills there.
That's awesome.
But the point is that is a great type of community. Red Hat hosts Linux user groups that you can go to. If you don't want to go to the Red Hat user group, go look for a local Linux user group in your area. If there's not one, consider creating one. You don't have to know everything to make the group, but that will kind of help to, collect people who know things and can kind of create that community of teaching and learning, and you can kind of, make the space that doesn't exist. And yeah, I had, fortunately, some people that I could turn to when I was coming up. Like I said, my friend Brian was amazing for me on that. My husband was already kind of down this path. I actually I became a software engineer because I lost a bet to my husband, actually. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know that.
I lost a bet. He bet I could. I thought I couldn't. I think I really lost that bet. Like, just 16 years later. Anyway, obviously I did not. I was wrong. Turns out I could. So there you have it. And yeah, but so there was that community helped a lot. There are online communities, of course, varying degrees of engagement, and everything. But and of course these office hours, like Ask an OpenShift admin. I think they also have In the Clouds. I don't know what they talk about on In the Clouds. I've never watched an episode. I'm so bad. This GitOps Guide to the Galaxy is so we're just so relaxed about this, right? We're just nerds doing nerd stuff. So feel free to come in with questions at any time, and we'll help as much as we can.
Yeah, and I think in the last, I don't know, I mean, 5 years, I guess, like the outreach has gotten so much better. You know what I mean? Like I think a lot of these big companies, Red Hat included, has always been very community driven, but like I think the outreach that we've seen and that we're like physically a part of, right, it has been awesome. And I mean, like, we've gotten to go to conferences and stuff like that, and like you're meeting people at conferences and spreading the word. And yeah, the user groups, that's actually like when I was learning Kubernetes, I went out to a Kubernetes user group. The guy that was running the one in San Antonio actually worked for CoreOS. Then we bought them, and then, or acquired them. Bought them sounds terrible. But so then CoreOS got acquired by Red Hat, and then they ended up coming here. So it was kind of cool to see that. And some of those guys that I met in that group were also some of the key people at VMware when they were doing the Tanzu stuff. So it's kind of cool to see how, like, especially in a big city, you're going to run into some people that are going to be, nerd famous, which is kind of cool. So.
Yeah. The Linux Foundation, by the way, also has a ton of resources.
Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
The Linux Foundation, the Open Source Foundation, like that's the open source. I think it's the Open Source Foundation, which was originally created by, I want to say Debian. That's who owns W3 Schools, right? I learned so much off of W3 Schools. So I still go over there. They're constantly adding more content. It's such a great resource. Anyway, so but yeah, check out the Linux Foundation. They have paid trainings, but they also have other stuff. Jonny mentioned the conferences and so forth. If you can get your employer to sponsor you to go to a conference, conferences are such a cool way to learn things. I've started participating when I get accepted as program committees members for some of the conferences. So like in the past, ArgoCon, I was on the program committee for. I'm on the program committee for the Platform Engineering Day at KubeCon Japan.
That's cool.
It's so cool. And so, we see what all these amazing people are like sending in all these awesome proposals. And you're just like, as a committee member, I'm glad I'm not a chair because I don't have to make the hard decision. I just get to make recommendations.
Right.
But it's terrible for me in a good way because I'm like, I want to recommend all of these. Yeah. And we talked about that when I did the ArgoCon program committee, right? I was like, I loved all of them. If I could ethically reach out to these people and invite them to present this on this live stream, I would do that because there were so many incredible talk options there. So also, if you've ever submitted a CFP that didn't get accepted and you would like to present it, please email me.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. I would love so many of them. I would love. But yeah, so if you can get your employer to sponsor or apply for a grant, I did to go to some of these conferences that the Linux Foundation has. I would highly recommend you do that because a conference is a great way to learn things. It's a great way to meet people, and then people will ask questions. And I have been asked all kinds of very interesting questions at conferences from people who are trying to solve really hard problems. And I've provided insight and expertise where I can. I'm happy to do that if I'm there, especially because that's why we get together like that. As I say, it's always armchair coding, right? When people ask us to solve problems, like, hey, my environment's doing this or whatever, and I'm like, I can't actually see a single line of code. This is armchair coding now. Yeah. So there's always a little bit of armchair coding in there where you could be completely wrong because of something you didn't know, but still, it's a great way to just like get connected, and gain industry context, and and have that networking thing happening. The social networking one, not the computers talking to each other networking one. Both of those are very difficult, by the way, and they require completely opposite skill sets to be good at.
Yeah, both magic, by the way.
Both are magic, absolutely.
Yeah, I always like hearing what people are doing. Like, oh, that's cool. I would have never even thought of that. Like some of the stuff, like I was at KubeCon in Salt Lake City, and they were like, hey, we submitted a talk. I can't remember who it was. They're like, we submitted a talk. They denied it, so that we were upset. So we wanted to figure out like which talks actually got some accepted. And they're like, oh, what's this thing called Argo? It seems like it's really popular. And so then they went back and they're like, I wonder if there's any bugs in there that we could exploit. And that's exactly what they did. So they just like, I wonder if. And then they would ask a question. They'd go answer the question. They'd ask another question. And they found like a security flaw in Argo, reported it back to Intuit, got it fixed upstream and all that. And it's crazy. I'm like, holy crap, that I would have never. I'm not that committed. I would have gotten to a certain point and be like, I'm over this. Like,
some people have so much tenacity. It's not me. I'm not some people, but some people really do. I'm lazy and impatient. So, there's that. We are at time. This was ChatGPT that for LinkedIn right now. Nice. We're at time. And I actually do have another meeting I have to get to. I guess in 2 weeks we'll talk about templating. We'll templating 2.0 in 2 weeks, or whatever else happens. Thank you everybody for the questions today. Hopefully that helped. And for everybody else, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
All right. See you.
Choose your tech debt wisely. Bye, guys.